Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. Good morning, good afternoon, hello, good day. My name is Jessica. I am with the ATAC team of Disability Rights New Jersey, and we are here today for another Tech Spotlight, our first of this month as we get back into the academic school year. So today we have our tech spotlight, which is entitled Designing Custom Keyguards for Students Who Are Blind or Visually Impaired. We have two presenters, Mariel Knauss. Mariel Knauss is an SLP and AAC specialist with a focus on assistive technology and communication access for students who are blind or visually impaired and who are deaf or hard of hearing. She's worked in school-based settings for 15 years, helping teams integrate high-tech AAC for students with any additional sensory differences. We also have Kenneth Hackbarth. Ken Hackbarth is the president and founder of Volksswitch, an organization devoted to democratizing assistive technology by leveraging the power and promise of 3D printing. Prior to his current position, he worked for almost 3 decades as a systems architect for AT&T Bell Laboratories and its subsequent divestitures. He has a Master's of Science in Evolutionary Biology from the University of Arizona, a Master's of Science in Systems Engineering from the University of Arizona as well, and a Master's of Education in Special Education with a concentration in Assistive Technology from Bowling Green State University. With all of that said, we hope you enjoyed today, and Mariel, the floor is all yours.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Just quick audio check. We're good at the moment, correct?
We are good.
We are good. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Well, hello from Colorado. Just a little ways away. We're having a lovely sunny day, so I hope you guys are as well. Um, Yeah, so today we are kind of splitting this into two parts. I'm going to talk a bit about pieces specific more to the AAC system as a whole and how we can modify that for students who are blind or visually impaired. And that will include using 3D printing and touch guides. And then Ken will go into the how to make and print independently. And this is something that I use on a daily basis when I'm at work. Almost all of the students I have sensory differences, and that includes like no functional vision, vision loss of different degrees, additional disabilities on top of that. I also work with students who both have visual impairment and are deaf or hard of hearing as well. So we're just always trying to stay on our toes and try to stay on top of things that are coming out, and so that we can just always make sure we are serving their needs to our best ability. Um, Really quickly, before we kind of dive in, how, if you're able, if you could just drop a message into the group chat. I'm just curious how many people are very familiar, use on a regular basis, high-tech augmentative alternative communication. So it would be just a yes or a no. Okay. So primarily yeses. Michelle, that's okay. I think I can pull it all together and it'll still make sense for you. Okay, next question. How many of you are familiar or have worked with blind or low vision students in the past? And again, that could just be yes or no. Okay, great. Okay. So that helps me know what you guys might know. Um, I'm going to progress our slides. Um, So what I'm gonna run through today, I have till about 10:30 and then Ken's gonna take over. So I'm gonna keep glancing at my time because I sometimes go on tangent mode. So I'll try to not do that. But what I'm gonna go through today is kind of an overview of AAC and accessibility, the importance of team approach when we're working with this population. I mean, really with any population in AAC, the team approach is vital. Adapting software internal features on the AAC device, adapting external features. And then I have two case studies that I will present, and then Ken's going to take over for the how to make custom touch guides. So kind of a little bit of background, which I feel probably you're all familiar with, but access points and AAC. Oftentimes when a student comes to us or um, if they are being seen by outside specialists, a lot of the time, because if they have no functional vision, especially, like they're really tactile and auditory only, usually specialists first attempt at trying to feature match involves auditory scanning because I think people just assume, well, they can't see it, so how are they going to activate the device? And what I've found is that I actually have much higher success when we use direct select over auditory scanning for the vast majority of my kiddos. But direct select being using a body part or tool to directly select a target area on the screen. Um, Generally, our grid could be, whatever size, but it's using eye gaze, skin touch. I also have students who like to will use their finger. I have students who will use kind of like a multi-finger touch, some that use the palm of their hand. I have several that like to use their big toe, and I have one right now that I'm working with, actually two who their kind of go-to is using the tip of their nose to activate. Can also utilize stylus or adapted stylus. Some of them have a ball and you can kind of put it in your hand like you're holding a squishy ball or a stress ball, and then they can kind of just directly touch the screen, just using a straightforward motion. There's other types of stylus that loop onto your hand, tons of stuff out there. There's also laser pointer for direct select and joystick or mouse use. Again, that's not the only way, but these are kind of the most popular methods if we're talking about direct select. Then there's indirect select, and that would be utilizing scanning. And that can be visual and or auditory scanning. And that's going to use, you're going to have at least one, you can have one or dual switches to activate that. And what I've found is with my students, if as long as we have decent fine motor control, the direct select almost always seems to be easier for them. It seems to they just take to it and kind of like take ownership of their device quicker than when we try audit or scanning with switches. And one key being that, if we're direct select, it's faster, right? And kids want to get things out as quickly and as easily as possible. I think the speed is definitely one huge point. Um, I also have worked with kids where we've really trialed scanning with switches for a while, and um, the cognitive load for that, while it seems like it could be easier because, motorically easier because you're not having to isolate or try to, identify a specific button. Um, what ends up happening is you have to retain more of the information. There's a much longer wait time. If you're scanning through, a grid of four, especially if you're using auditory scanning only and not visual, because really your scan pattern is going to be very long because it can't highlight necessarily whole rows as easily if you were, using visual access to that. So I think just kids want to do what's going to be the quickest and easiest. And while I have had some success with scanning, I just my word of advice is to try, even if they have no functional vision, try using direct select. Um, when we are um, trialing or planning to trial high tech AAC with students. We have a very, very integrated team approach. I'm an SLP. We have a couple other SLPs on our campus. I usually am always involved because I deal mostly with AAC, and if it's a different SLP, they will be involved too if they directly serve that student. We obviously need to take into account primarily the AAC user. The family's buy-in is huge. So I always make sure, even though I am in a school setting currently, I always make sure that when we are doing trials, stuff's going home, and I'll do little training sessions with families because their buy-in is going to often make or break. And if they feel like they get a say, and if they feel confident and comfortable with modeling in the home environment, um, they can actually provide some really beneficial data as well. So I also always send home a data sheet. It's pretty basic with family, but just so we can see, okay, well, how's it going in that setting versus the educational setting, because they can be very different. I also always rope in our TVIs, which are our teachers of the visually impaired. They have lots of really helpful advice and suggestions, always specifically when it comes to simplifying color, contrast, preferred colors, just different ways on how to support that student and their use of vision if they do have any. Um, Next, OT. Um, Obviously, one of my best buddies to have around as far as working on best access method. And so they'll always be with me when we're trialing out different or new access methods if it's beyond just using like finger or direct skin touch generally. Um, our PT is super important, especially with positioning, and they've actually also given us some really good insight as to like how to incorporate gravity and ease of access. So for some students, having to go in a forward motion is just too much. But if we can have them positioned, or we can have the device um, lower and down, then allowing gravity to help can sometimes be really beneficial. And it can increase their accuracy with direct select and or even with switch positioning too. Obviously the SLPs, and then for us in the school setting, that any aides or one-to-ones that work with that student, because they they are really know, even beyond the teachers, they know that student the best. And then lastly, I like to include our orientation and mobility specialists, and that's what the O&M stands for, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. But they actually can provide a ton of insight. They use the ones at where I work use tactile maps regularly with students. They're always using terminology such as, right, left, directional, top, bottom. So when we're trying to figure out access and um, kind of points like how to orient the device for the student, they also can provide a lot of really useful information. So obviously trying to get everyone together is always the challenge. And sometimes we just, do a group chat. But really getting weigh-in and buy-in from all parties um, has definitely accelerated our success rates. Like I feel before when we weren't including as many people, I don't feel like the students were mastering use of the devices quickly. And now that we really make a emphasis to include everyone, I feel like our students are just really coming out of their shells. Um, so next I'm going to talk about some of the system modifications. Sorry. So things within the actual device that we can modify to make things more accessible for our students with low vision or no vision. Um, if my kiddos have no functional vision, I always use auditory prompts with them. And not all devices and apps have this feature, so it does limit it a bit. That being said, I've yet to work with a student who we haven't found a good match for, even though, we have more of a closed set than, all the devices and all the apps. But I will show a video next that goes over kind of the three different types that different devices have programmed in for auditory prompt. One's a double press, one's a press and hold, and another is a hold and lift option. So again, not all devices can provide auditory prompts in the same way. So that's something that you also need to consider if it's an option to provide them at all. Visual modifications. Again, this is where our TVI, teacher of the visually impaired, even our orientation mobility specialists can provide really helpful info. We can turn on features such as highlight, frame. So a frame will show up around a button. What the colors that we're using. Does the student have a preferred color that tends to draw their attention more than others? How are we differentiating buttons? Sometimes doing like kind of in columns like black background, red background, black, red can help break up the screen a bit. Sometimes for some other students, that's too visually distracting. So it is a lot of trial and error when it comes to really honing in on visually what is helpful for these students. And honestly, I almost feel sometimes that for my kids with no functional vision, it I feel like sometimes we make progress faster because we don't have to be necessarily taking all the visual modifications into account. We're also considering spacing between buttons and the number of buttons on the grid. And obviously motor access as well as vision will impact that. We also need to look at features such as animate or even zoom. So there's some AAC devices that when you touch the button, they're gonna while touching that specific button kind of enlarges. So it draws attention. And again, I've had a lot of success with that with some of my students with CVI, cortical vision impairment. And then I've had some students where it's like it's too much sensory input. So again, trial and error. Um, I'm going to play this video I just recorded. It's the three different types of auditory prompts that I use frequently. And you might want to turn your volume off up, or up, sorry, way up. There is volume, but it's a little bit quiet. So, well, let's give it a go. If no one can hear it, please let me know. The audio starts in a minute.
Can I tell you something? Can I ask you something? Can I ask you something? Who is that? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
Questions. People. Chat. Hello.
Hello.
Stop. Go. No.
No.
So, so with those, the auditory prompt voice is always going to be the thing that you hear first. And I generally try to make it quieter. I didn't want to do it so much on this video because I was afraid you wouldn't be able to hear it at all. But we usually either try to make the auditory prompt voice quieter or maybe go directly if the student's willing to wear headphones or something of that nature, Bluetooth. We'll have it go directly to their audio. And then, so that's essentially their ability to scan and figure out, okay, what is it that I'm selecting? And then when they hear what they want, they'll, the different options are, we keep holding our finger and then our main voice activates, or we press again to activate the main voice, or we release to activate the main voice if we're doing the touch and drag and then activate upon release. And so we try to make the prompt voice a little bit quieter. I usually do the prompt voice opposite gender, or just if it's a young kid, I'll maybe make it like a adult voice just so they have that clear tie of, okay, this is my auditory prompt voice, this is my voice, this is what I'm saying. Um, um, Next, I just want to touch on some of the external features, and this is what Ken will be really diving into, but device and accessory considerations. And for our students who are blind, something that or have low vision, device size can be really like a key thing that we're focusing on, because if a student has some functional vision, sometimes bigger is better, and we can include a slightly larger grid set. But for some of my students, sometimes like the fatigue of having to look for if it's too large of an area can actually be harder for them. And then for my students who have no functional vision, almost always we go smallest device size possible. I have one student right now who, unfortunately, it was discontinued, but Nova Chat 5. And that allows for auditory prompts in an effective manner. Unfortunately, none of the new phone size dedicated devices that have come out in the past year have that built-in feature for auditory prompts, and you have to use the iOS accessibility features, and it's just not, it doesn't flow as well at all. So I'm really bummed out that they got rid of the NovaChat 5, but I'm hoping something else will come in. But I have a student utilizing that right now. And we put a little handle on the top and she holds it and she uses her thumb to activate the whole device. And that's what the goldish kind of tan goldy colored um, uh, piece of plastic is in the pictures on this slide. Um, we are also, so size is huge, size of the device. We're also considering size. Oh, something popped up in the chat. Okay. Size of the, oops, I need to close that. Size of the opening. So if a student's using functional vision, obviously we don't want to be taking up a lot of space with the grid, and we don't want it to be covering up too much. So that's one consideration. Another consideration is how much space does a student need to be able to access that button effectively via direct select. So whether that's with the palm of their hand versus pointer finger versus their nose, that's all going to impact the size of the openings as well. Um, I have also made openings intentionally, occasionally very small, because I've had some kids who are just like sensory seeking and just like to touch, touch, touch. And the smaller the openings, the more purposefully they really have to push their finger in to activate. And that's actually, for some of my students, been super helpful. Also, the thickness of the plastic, again, the plastic is also serving as a barrier from their skin to the screen. And a lot of my students, we work on trying to orient one hand as like a placeholder essentially or an anchor. And then we're using our other hand to then scan, and it increases their proprioceptive awareness of where they are in space if we can get one hand anchored. That being said, if the screen's wide open and they're, anchoring top corner, their skin's just going to be activating the screen. And then when we're trying to activate over here, it's going to glitch because it doesn't know what we're actually trying to touch. So sometimes we'll add in some textural things to support that, but making sure that their screen where they are anchoring a hand is not being directly touched or activated by that body part. We also consider the shape of the cutouts. Again, sometimes tiny circles are great if we're really trying to make it very purposeful and isolated touch. But sometimes for students, if they're using, more of a full hand touch, then we have to increase the size of the cutouts as well. And I did mention so tactile markers. That's something that I've found to be super helpful. It's hard to see, but in the bottom picture of this slide, this device, Novitat 8, there's some triangular, oh, it's kind of like a triangle in the top left corner, and it has some ridges that are horizontally in there. And that was for a student who would kind of like anchor the hand there, but kind of stem with her thumb. And we found that with adding that, we were getting we were reducing the amount of time she was trying to activate the device with two hands simultaneously. So that was really helpful. So I'm going to give you two case studies real quickly. So student A, this is obviously a touch guide we designed for this student, is preschool, no functional vision. When this individual first came, they had never used AAC before. No spoken language, but very melodic, loves music, creating music, drumming, any of those things. This student, we also want to always consider, do they have tactile aversions? Because sometimes adding in more tactile features on a touch guide can actually then make the student less willing to explore and touch. But this student had none. So, and the student also had no fine motor concerns. So we are working on using pointer finger for direct select and thumb, depending on how their hand is oriented for the different buttons. This device was, this was an Accent 800, so it's the smallest Accent that they have out right now. And again, we also tried an Accent 1000. And for this individual, the smaller device definitely seemed more appropriate as they could get to buttons quicker. And I think also too, it's like when that kind of motor memory, even if you're using your cell phone and you're typing on the keyboard with your thumb, the smaller it is, the more aware you and the more accurately you can get to different buttons. When it's big, and if you were, if your screen was this big and you're trying to hit stuff without really any tactile markers, it's just going to be a lot more difficult, and it's going to take more time. So we added in kind of a oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word, ridges around the top row, because that was an activity row. So buttons lower would activate specific words related to the core vocabulary, and they pull up like associated words in the activity row. And that was just a way for us to kind of like signify, okay, this is like the lower buttons are our core words, and we can press those individually. But if we want to say more related to that, then it's going to come up here. And it seemed to go really well. We have one more trial device for this student, and then we're going to really be honing in on what best met their needs. But again, even when we're trialing things for these students, this was prototype 4 for just this device. So it's considering the vocab set. Are there any special buttons or things on the vocab set that need to be highlighted or could be enhanced with a touch guide? And how the vocab set's arranged, right? And so it's a lot of trial and error. I usually draw out stuff and send them to my team members and say, hey, like, what do you guys, let's vote. Which one of these should be our starting point versus what will we try next? And it's a lot of trial and error, but being able to get these printed, like I said, I can generally get 2 a day done with the printer we have is really, it's helpful for sure. Next student. So student B, this is an individual who is middle school aged. Again, this person has no functional vision. So we're really just relying on auditory and tactile. This individual came to us a bit older and was also never exposed to any high-tech AAC previously. So new user, and this individual does have some spoken language, primarily echolalia, gestalts, but again, could be enhanced significantly with AAC. No significant tactile aversions for this individual, no fine or gross motor concerns. And this student does like to chuck things. So we we use a C clamp, and we actually tether the handle of the device to the C clamp so the student can move it or all around on the desk, but it literally can't go flying through the air. So that was just something that I tried, and it was successful. But as far as the touch guide goes, we were using a vocab set. This is a Grid Pad Go. So it uses grid. It runs off of grid, and we have modified a custom vocab set. And in the top, we have those 2 and 2 buttons that are encased by the ridges, and that helps us. Those were special function buttons. So one was a clear, one was a like tap, like a press to talk. So once the students formulated their full thought, then they can press and have it talk. The other 2 were for more kind of navigational skills that we were addressing with this vocab set. Again, we also included some little ridges to help the student be aware of, okay, where is center of the device? And as far as the kind of, if we're looking at the 3 lower rows, what's my middle row? And just giving those orientation cues, because when we have the vocab that's consistent and also takes into consideration motor planning, once the students really get going, they absolutely do not have to use the auditory prompting for every button. Or they can oftentimes they'll get close, maybe they'll be like 1 or 2 off, but at least they're in the vicinity, because their brains just start to map out where everything is, and having the extra support of the touch guides can get them honestly, my one student actually who's using the Nova Chat 5 right now, I mean, she has buttons like locked in with the use of the touch guide and just the motor memory piece. She will get to buttons on her first try on different pages that are purposeful and that she intended to press. So it's pretty cool. There's lots of things you can do with it. I totally went over Ken. I'm sorry. I was trying to talk fast. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'll let Ken go, and maybe if there's any questions at the end, and we can kind of chime in.
Really
Yeah.
quickly, what I can also do, this is Jesse, everyone. Really quickly, what I can also do, because I know we only have about 20 minutes or so left on our time, but I can also take any questions from people later on at the end, and we'll find a way to get them to our speakers, no problem. But yeah, take it away, Ken. Floor is all yours.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, don't worry, Mario. It's more important for people to buy into the why before you even talk about the how. So I'm going to share. And then start up the presentation. All right, so I'm assuming that you can see my first slide. Is that correct?
We can.
Great. And there we go. All right, so the tool that Mariel is using to create those key guards is, and I'm going to use the word key guard here instead of touch guide. It's just I had to choose a word and I chose that. But they're the same exact concept. This is the homepage for it, and I'm going to drop into the chat the URL for this. So, yeah, chat. All right, so that's there. And I may or may not do that for some of the other links here. If you guys want a copy of these slides, just let Jessie know, and I'll ensure that she can give them to you. All right. Yeah, this is the homepage. This is where you start to your keyguard design journey. Everything I'll talk about today is free and open source. So I want to give you just a quick idea of what's possible with the keyguard designer as in support of people who are blind or visually impaired. This is a keyguard. It's the black thing here you see with the raised white elements. This is a keyguard that was designed to support LampWords for Life, the VI, visually impaired version of that software. You can also create a keyguard that has openings into which you insert cell inserts, and those inserts can have Braille on them. So if you're teaching both Braille and AAC at the time, you can combine those in a keyguard. To begin your design journey, you'll visit this site, which is the Printables website, along with the keyguard homepage. And you'll download two files. One is the designer itself, the keyguard designer, and you can think of it as an Excel spreadsheet. You have to first have Microsoft Excel before you can use an Excel spreadsheet. In this instance, you're going to need a copy of OpenSCAD installed on your computer in order to use the keyguard designer, which runs inside of that. And OpenSCAD is also free and open source. Let's see, yeah, next. So this is what the keyguard designer looks like when it's running. I'm also going to quickly pop up this interface. So in the latest release of the designer, I made some changes so that it could also run in a web app provided by MakerWorld. And that's a company that's owned, I believe, by Ultimaker, who makes 3D printers. But you can do this strictly as a web app. It's not quite as powerful as using OpenSCAD, but it comes pretty close. All of this stuff is described on the website that I provided the URL for earlier. So this is what it looks like when it's running. It's a display area over here and a set of expandable sections over here on the right. This area is called the customizer. And you're going to do almost all of your work here. And that's where I'm going to do almost all my work as well when I demo this. And there's an area below the display that's called the console pane. And both OpenSCAD and my program, my designer program, can put messages here for you for your edification. So some of the most often used features for individuals who are blind or visually impaired are ridges. And these ridges here are, you can see several of them around openings to buttons in the app. And they provide, as Mariel described, navigation landmarks for people using the AAC app. It's simple within the designer to alter these ridges. For example, you can easily change their height. You can change their thickness. You can change their height and thickness together. And so I'm going to point out there are areas of the customizer, parts of the customizer that are specifically designed to support these navigational elements or support people who are blind or visually impaired. Other ones are just for creating the basic keyguard or touch guide. So there are two sections I want to talk about today. One is this grid special settings section that we'll use that for laying out the keyguard and putting ridges exactly where we want them around cells. There's also a cell inserts section for creating those cell inserts with Braille aspects. So in the grid special section, did I say that twice? In the grid special settings section, you'll specify which cell openings should have these surrounding ridges, along with their height and thickness. The cell insert section, that's for putting the Braille, what kind of Braille, the size of the Braille, where would you like the Braille located? And finally, you can put instructions in the second file. So the first file you're downloading from that website is the Keyguard Designer itself that runs within OpenSCAD. The second file is this text file. It's for adding other features to your Keyguard, raised features of variety of kinds. But it's for handling things that are very, I don't know, idiosyncratic, whatever that word would be, very specific to your keyguard and are general enough to try to put them somehow into the customizer pane. So this is an example of the kinds of things that you can do with raised and engraved features. And you can add these to your keyguard by either placing in most of these, in all of these instances, by placing instructions in that second file, the openings and additions file. You can add ridge lines and arcs. We've seen these in Mariel's work. You can add ridges in various shapes, circles, rectangles, rounded rectangles. You can add bumps, and Mariel had one example of that in one of her keyguards. And you can add embossed or engraved text to the degree that this would be useful, and embossed and engraved in graphics. So here's what the openings and additions file looks like to add all the ridges on this previous slide. There are 14 ridge features and there are 14 instructions. So one instruction for every feature you want to add. Uh, there are instructions on the website for how to create each of these. There are instructions for creating instructions on the website. I often go to the website to remind myself, what do I put where again, and what name do I use? So I don't assume anyone will have memorized that. Too fast. All right, so I'm going to spend the remaining time here trying to recreate this key guard that Mariel pointed out. I'm going to start by saying she gave me basic information about the tablet and case and other things that and the app that she wanted this key guard for. And things like what type of tablet was being used, information about the opening in the case that exposes the screen. That's going to play a large role in determining how big the key guard is, its dimensions. Some things about the layout of the app itself, and then information about how the grid is laid out and how she would like the key guard to provide access to that grid. So I am now going to bring up the designer myself, and I'm going to put those values into the designer just to show you what that looks like. I don't know if there's a best way to make your screen as big as possible. Sometimes it's hard to see what's going on over here in the customizer. But I'm first going to go to the tablet case or tablet region and select that Surface Go 3 from this pull-down list. And you can watch the display on the right. Hopefully I haven't passed it already. Yeah. Watch the display on the left here, sorry. And you'll notice that every time I choose something, the display updates to show what the designer now thinks about what you're working on. Now I'm going to go down to the tablet case region. I'm going to put in those dimensions that Mariel gave me. The opening is 155 millimeters high and 225 millimeters, 225 millimeters wide, and it has a corner radius of 6 millimeters. So again, the display updated when each one of those changes were made. It's just got a default layout for the grid at this point, so don't worry about that yet. Then in the app layout, she measured the app layout in millimeters instead of pixels, and the status bar height there is 8 millimeters. You see that the openings move down to accommodate the fact that there's other things above the grid area. And in describing the grid, she said there are 4 rows and 5 columns. And that she wants circular openings. And those openings should be 17 millimeters in diameter. So we got the basic layout at this point. And it looks like this. Now I'd like to add ridges around particular cell openings, and she actually covered this one in the middle at the top. And so I'm going to cover those, but I have to tell the designer how to determine where the ridges go and what I want to cover. So each of these openings is numbered, starting in the lower left corner and proceeding across from left to right. So her design wanted to cover opening 18 and put ridges around. If I look at these, I count them: 2, 4, 7, 9, and so on, these numbers up here. So we'll go ahead and add those now, add those instructions to the designer. That's in Grid Special Settings. We're going to cover 18. You'll see it disappeared in the display. And we're going to put ridges around 2, everything is separated by commas, 4, 7, 9, 12, 14. Move the mouse out of the way. 17, and 19. Hit the enter key. There are your ridges. We could adjust their height, their width at this point by changing these values down here, but I'm not going to bother. So now we've got our ridges and our covered opening. All right, next we're going to add these arbitrary ridges. By arbitrary, I just mean it's very hard to know exactly where the SLP or TVI or whoever is going to want them to be. So these will be individual instructions in the openings and additions file. I'm not going to add every one of these. I'm just going to show you basically how it's done. So she wants 6 horizontal ridges. They're called out there. You see them in red here. And a horizontal ridge just has the name H ridge to represent the fact it's a horizontal ridge. Vertical ridges, she wanted 4 of those. Even these little things are ridges. They're just different lengths. And she wants these rounded rectangle ridges as well around a couple of the cell openings. So first, I want to just tell you how do you specify these things? Well, a ridge, horizontal ridge, has a width and an anchor point. You're on the left corner. That anchor point describes where the ridge begins, and we'll use the X and Y coordinates of this spot to anchor the ridge in space. Here's what the instruction looks like for this ridge. The X and Y values are specified as 25 and 50. The width is set to 100. I don't have to say anything about the height. There we go. This top slope column is used to specify the height of the ridge in millimeters. And the bottom slope is to specify the width of the ridge or the thickness of the ridge. And again, all these specifics of what goes in what columns, that's all described on the website. Now, notice that you don't see any units for any of these things, and that's because you will specify in the designer in the freeform and hybrid keyguard opening section that you want these kinds of numbers to be interpreted as millimeters and lower left and measured from the lower left corner of the screen. And Jesse, I see you've come back in. I think you're probably ready to warn me about something.
Yes, I'm just going to give you a 5-minute warning.
Yep.
I didn't know if there was one particular thing that you wanted to hit home before we open it up for any questions, so that we didn't just rush you off the screen, basically.
Yeah. No, let me cover 2 things, and I'll just fly forward to them. Vertical ridges, same kind of concept. Rounded rectangles. You specify specific items for them. The name for this one has a C in front because it's anchored in the center of the shape. You can also use variables in putting these instructions together, so you don't have to remember how tall or wide your opening is or your screen. So there are variables for screen width, screen height, and so these pair of instructions puts the ridges halfway across the screen, halfway up the screen as well. And this is what they look like when in use. This particular one would do better not using the screen as the way to define things, but rather use the grid itself as the way to define it. So we're halfway across the grid or we're halfway up the grid rather than the screen. Here's my final thoughts before we ask questions. When you're trying to get measurements to do these keyguards or touch guides, there are 3 critical measurements. One is the height of the opening in the case, the width of the opening in the case, and the corner radius of these corners. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to get these measurements using a ruler. So we created this 3D printable tool called the Easy Measurement Tool. And if you're located in the US and you're going to get into doing keyguard design, just email me your postal address and I'll send one of these to you for free. There we go. Questions?
Great. So far I only see one in the chat, and I hope this person doesn't mind that I make it easier um, just by vocalizing what she wrote. So she says, where can we find the designs shown in today's presentation? I see there's a spot to buy on Etsy off of, for example, the Volksswitch website. Is there a spot where we can print on our own the already made design?
Let me jump in here real quick, Mariel. So Mariel designed all her own stuff. So if you would like to replicate the things she has done, I would just contact her and say, can you tell me what information I need to build your design? The Volksswitch website has some ready to print designs, but they're not targeted at a particular visually impaired or blind or otherwise audience. They're just basic keyguard designs for the most popular apps and the most popular layouts and the most popular cases. And you can download those for free. And if you follow up with me, I can even point you to the web page where you can get at those. The Etsy site that's referenced on Volksswitch are just some people who helped with getting those ready to print designs ready or defined. And I want to make clear that we're not associated with them in any way. Ours is strictly a for-loss company. Mariel, anything you want to add?
No, I think I think that that's pretty much it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean the files are gonna change, I mean variables change based on okay, if you're the version of the device, because it's crazy how much screen size changes just based on the version of the device that you have. So even if it's an Accent 800, right? If it's an older version, it might be slightly different from a newer version, versus an Accent 800 versus a 1000 are going to be, even if you want like the same vocab set, same grid, like the measurements are going to be different. So yeah, they kind of have to take into consideration the version, this the version of the device, and the actual size of it too.
And I just put my email address in the chat if you want to get a hold of me and get further information about what's available to you and how you get at it.
Yeah, I can have mine too.
Excellent. So I will, um, by tomorrow at some point, be sending out an email to everyone who registered and showed up today. Um, at that point, I will um, have the PowerPoint slides from our presenters and any other information that they would like to pass along, just so that we can tie this up as neatly as possible. And if anybody has further questions, they'll know how to reach out to our presenters. We just want to say thank you to everyone who came today, and thank you especially to Mariel and Ken for your time and your expertise.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having us. Yep.
So I'm going to stop the recording.